For Victims and Villains, my name is Josh. Today we're jumping into the post-apocalyptic world of Arcadian, starring the great Nicolas Cage. For those of you guys that have been following us for a while, you know that I am one of two co-hosts for That's High Praise, our Nicolas Cage podcast here at Victims and Villains. And we are currently on a sabbatical while my co-host takes care of some personal things and really focuses on his mental health. Mental health to us is way more important than content creation, and I hope if you guys have a Nicolas Cage fixation like I do, I hope this short review will be fix that itch for you and maybe put you onto this movie. But if you're interested in checking out other Nicolas Cage content, we do have an entire backlog of podcast episodes from That's High Praise here on YouTube as well as on our website. As I mentioned in the beginning of this video, Arcadian is a post-apocalyptic world, and it tells the story of two sons and their father as they navigate this world and essentially try and survive from one day to another. I'll be honest with you, I had a love-hate relationship with this movie throughout the entirety of the films. There were moments where I genuinely was entertained, where I loved this movie, and then there were moments where I was bored and didn't care for the characters. So I really just feel like I'm just right down the line for it. There's things that I really love about this movie, things I really hate. Kind of keeping this in a more classic and traditional review, I'll talk about the things that I really loved first. I really loved the character design of the monsters. In a post-Cloverfield world, we're seeing a lot more of these monster movies kind of pop up and kind of imitate elements of that. This one seems to imitate a lot more elements of A Quiet Place and really lends into my frustration, especially with this last act, because it kind of really falls apart for me. It becomes really predictable. Really, the emotional element of it that they're trying to establish just falls flat. There's a lot that just kind of, it feels rotten in the third act. I will say for this monster, though, the character design is very haunting. It's very cool looking. It feels very Japanese. I know there is a couple of manga artists and illustrations that I've seen that are very close to this one monster, and I just think bringing that into live action is absolutely terrifying, but it's hauntingly beautiful at the same time. I really love the lore surrounding this world as well. I think the lore and the mythology is one thing this movie definitely gets right. It's very strong, has a good foundation to land on, and it's just very engaging and very spectacular when the film is engaging in those moments and those elements of the story. As much as I love Nicolas Cage as an actor, he's just kind of okay in this movie. I really wish I had more to say about him, but it seems like even though he's top billed and he is a producer on this movie, it feels like he's only in the story like a third of the time. Definitely feels like the story follows the sons a lot more than it does the father. The sons are definitely more developed than the Cage character. And I didn't have a problem with that. I am a huge fan. I love it. Obviously, I have Float on my knuckles. And so Jaeden Mitchell, who played Billy in the 2017 version, plays one of Cage's sons in here. He is the standout performance for me in this movie. I thought that Mitchell just gave an absolute powerhouse performance. He's a really well-developed character, but also he's kind of the smart character within them. So like getting to see him establish traps and getting to see him work against the monsters, absolutely fascinating and just really compelling performances. And we're back to the unevenness of this movie. Maxwell Jenkins plays the other son in this movie, and again, he's the most developed. Literally everything in this movie from him just feels like such a massive departure from the overarching story. And Jenkins in and of himself as a performer in this movie, it's okay, it's not great, it's not terrible, it's just okay. As I mentioned, a lot of his arc throughout the course of the film is essentially he befriends local neighbors that are vastly rich in this society, and he has the family take a liking to him and kind of blows up in his face later. And it feels like they tried to put in too much extra stuff into this world and really complicate it, and or possibly even differ themselves enough from A Quiet Place to where it felt original, but it just feels like it really just bogs down the movie. Like, there's an entire subplot romance between Jenkins and another character, and every time they would kind of hint at this romance, it just felt like it was departing itself from the best parts of the movie and the overarching narrative following this father and sons. Pacing feels off track because of those decisions to veer the narrative away from the path. And when that happens, those story beats involving the sons and Nicolas Cage and the monsters and the mythology and the lore of this world, anytime it stays on track, it has a nice steady beat. But anytime it veers off of that, the story seems to really slow down and really just come to a snail's pace, and then it's got to play catch up at getting back on the path. And this movie's not a long movie whatsoever. This movie is 90 some minutes with credits, and I can't tell you how many times I was bored by some of the side stuff that just kind of seemed to take precedence in the second act. That's it. I'm going to go ahead and run this one through the Rorschach rating scale. I'm going to go ahead and give Arcadian a 3 out of 5. I really wanted to love this movie more, but it has a really sloppy execution. It makes it blatant. It literally has blatant plagiarism in the third act. Third act falls apart. Side stories for characters that you don't care about. But again, on the flip side of that, it has a fascinating and riveting lore. The character design is hauntingly beautiful, and Nicolas Cage is in this movie. Like, that already bumps it up from, an average movie to an okay movie. Maybe that's my bias coming through, but I was still entertained even with a lot of my gripes and problems with this movie. I still think Mitchell and Jenkins still do a good job in this movie. Jenkins a little bit less so than Mitchell, but overall, this movie was still really entertaining, and this is one that you can just kind of turn your brain off and just enjoy. Now, Arcadian is currently experiencing a limited theatrical run and will be out everywhere on Shudder later this year. So make sure that you guys are subscribed to Shudder or subscribe to their socials so that you guys can see when this movie debuts. If you guys have had a chance to see it, what did you guys think about it? Comment below and let me know. But let's talk about mental health real quick. If you guys are new to our content, Mental Health Moment is where we take a theme out of the movie which we're talking about, break it down for a few moments in the hopes to deconstruct the stigma surrounding mental health. Part of the lore of this movie is setting up boundaries and knowing how far you can go before the sun sets, and ultimately leading to your quite possible demise. And I think it's such a beautiful metaphor for how we need to treat our own mental health. Be sure to set up boundaries and know what you can and cannot handle, why you can or cannot handle those boundaries, and really allowing yourself to be strong enough to say no when someone attempts to push through those boundaries. And here's something to keep in mind as well, that as we grow as people, our tendencies for boundaries and our mental health boundaries also grow and develop with us. And so in those growth process, it is this process of asking yourself, are these mental health boundaries still applicable to where I am today, and reassessing those. Boundaries should be a topic that we are continually revisiting when it comes to our mental health, because as we grow as people, also our mental health also grows as people. What sometimes didn't affect our mental health now does, given life's crazy, ever-evolving circumstances. So my question for you is, when was the last time that you established your own mental health boundaries and or even revisited your mental health boundaries? If you or someone you know is currently struggling with suicide, addiction, self-harm, or depression, please click the links in the show notes below to check out our mental health resource library. While we love talking about films and new releases and sharing our thoughts on them and giving you guys spoiler-free reviews right here, the heartbeat of why we do what we do is to bring mental health conversation to the forefront and talk about how art not only affects mental health but also betrays it. Arcadian is now playing in a limited release from RLJE Films and Shudder, and will be available to stream later this year on Shudder. So check your local listings, check your Shudder app or the Shudder social media to check it out. I just want to go ahead and thank one last time our Horrific Hope sponsors once again: Fierce Literature, Coven Salon, Worlds Away Escape, Raven, Conjure, and Tin Top Art, all of which you guys can find links for in the show notes below. We will have more content from Horrific Hope coming in the next couple of weeks. Submissions open back up May 6th, so mark your calendars. It's filmfreeway.com/Horrific Hope Film Festival. And until next time, remember to keep it classy and keep it scary.